Welcome back to the next mastermind call with Every Move Collective, hosted by myself and my mom and business partner, Eva Kasoria. As always, we're joined by our team out of New York and Connecticut. So my brother Dylan's here on this call. We probably have Margaret and Deanna somewhere in the room as well. And today we are very fortunate to have industry expert Jason Kay joining us from Boulder, Colorado. Hey, Jason.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being with us. As many of our attendees who are, repeat visitors know, we've created this community as a space to foster learning, networking, support. We do this on the second and fourth Monday of every month. It's always a different topic, a different guest. So we encourage you to be as conversational as possible. Use the chat, chime in, raise your hand. Most importantly, if you're able to turn your cameras on, it would mean a whole lot to us and to our guests if you are able to show your beautiful faces. So anyway, today we are going to be talking about the hot topic of the buyer agency agreement post-NAR ruling. And I'm sure a lot of you have been in sessions about this before, but they've set a date now, August 17th. Who knows if it'll stick or not? But we're kind of coming up on the time where this is a real. Ooh, is that you, Trish?
I'm gonna mute myself. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I think everyone comes in off mute. So if you are able to mute, that would be great. But anyway, I just want to quickly introduce Jason. Jason had a long career as a mechanical engineer in R&D product development, and then he joined his wife Trish, who just had that buzzer noise go off in her very successful real estate business back in 2013. They've since sold nearly $1 billion in volume together, which is an incredible feat. 35 of Jason's last 37 buyer sides, he's taken the client out once and then gotten them under contract. So he is an expert on how to navigate working with buyers, especially in this changing space. And so he's going to present to us some tools that you can all integrate into your business. And then there's going to be open discussion at the end for questions and whatnot. So thanks for being with us, Jason.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Standard basic. If everyone can just mute, that would be great. We'll go through and mute too, but if you are with us, just mute. All righty. Should be good to go. Do you have I don't know if you're sharing a screen, Jason. So if you need me to give you permission to, just let me know.
Okay, I've got slides if I need to. We can do this however you want. Keep it informal and question and answer, or just go through and hit some highlights.
Yeah. I mean, I do know we have one question that stood out to me that was submitted in the RSVP box, and that kind of encompasses like how to handle the buyer when you have the listing. So I know we're going to be talking a lot about how buyer agents work with the buyers today, but also there's like the unique perspective of actually being the listing agent and how you navigate that relationship with the buyer side.
Jason, before you answer, just if I could jump in really quickly. I think we do have people from all over the country. So when you talk about this decision, if you can reference, if there are differences across, states, et cetera.
There are. There are definitely differences. So the first thing I would say is if you haven't heard what your current state's ruling is on the NAR settlement, definitely go in and find that out. Either talk to your broker or go talk to the individuals, the attorneys, to find that information out. Because, for example, I know in Colorado and New Jersey, the rules are different on what you can and cannot do. Some of the NAR settlement goes directly against Colorado state law. So some of what NAR wants us to do is in direct violation of our laws. So we can't do that. So you need to know this. Go go talk to your state brokers, go talk to state counsel and find it out, or an attorney. I know in Colorado, Damian Cox is one of our real estate attorneys, and he's worked closely with Scott Peterson, who is our car legal counsel. And it's like, okay, this is what is coming down from the state level on what we need to do and how we need to do it. And that's something that you guys definitely need to figure out. So there's some generalities. That's true across the board. The main thing is just be open with everyone. Clear communication. That's the biggest thing that you need to do. If you show people why you're doing things and tell them why you're doing things, they will understand it. And that's exactly what the DOJ wants to see have happen. So if you're transparent in your dealings, you're good. That's the nutshell. Good question, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So as far as your question on how to format, we are happy to have you have some initial conversation, because I think, you know, your superpower and your skill set is centered around the conversations that come with this new change, or these, you know, these new laws.
Yeah.
So I think it would be really beneficial if you jumped into that a little bit. And then, of course, if you want to share, you know, something on screen, we're happy to support that.
Sure, absolutely. So some of the biggest takeaways that you can go through here, very simply, is commissions as we know it are not going to be broadcast anymore to the buyer's agent. So how do you get around this as the listing agent? Some people, what they're doing is they're rolling it into sellers' concessions that can be used explicitly for closing costs. They're not saying that it's a commission or a co-op. Here's money we're offering to be used as you see fit for closing costs. Again, check with your state, check with your attorneys, check with your brokers to see if you're allowed to do this. This is the direction we're being pointed in Colorado. Some of the big things as a buyer's agent, you know, if you're not getting co-op, you can set how you're being paid. That means it could be a fixed fee, it could be an hourly fee, it could be a percent of the sales price as a commission. It could be a combination thereof. It depends what you agree with on your clients. What this means is it's going to come down to two groups of people ultimately. You're going to have we're going to have a group of people that are going to have the Walmart proposition that's high value. And then you're going to have a group of people, you're going to have high volume. Then you're going to have a group of people who are going to charge like professionals, which will be high value. Neither's wrong. Just know what your value proposition is and how you plan on handling it. So from there, what do? You know, well, that really comes down to the point of where you are. So finishing off what you have to do. MLSs are going to start pulling out starting on the 17th, maybe even before, commissions. So in my buyer's presentation, I'm telling my clients, hey, listen, you know, we're agreeing to a fixed percentage that you're paying me. I'm not going to know what the other side is offering. I'm going to have to call them and ask, are you okay with that? Because that means I'm not going to have the information immediately. So I'm getting the permission to do it. A big part of what I do in that whole buyer presentation is I control the conversation by asking questions just like that. So a lot of this is skills that I've developed over the years. A lot of it's based on NLP or neuro-linguistic programming, as well as DISC. So for me, those are the two by far biggest things. If you don't have those skills, you're going to need them. Because basically when you're dealing with your buyers these days, it's going to be like going out for a listing presentation. And with DISC explicitly, if you don't speak the language the other person naturally speaks, you might as well be speaking a foreign language in many cases. So for instance,
to like get a show of hands of how many people are familiar with DISC. And if your camera isn't off, just you can drop it in the chat.
A lot of hands, cool. So real fast, for those of you who don't know DISC, if you're talking to an executive who's likely a high DC, which nickname is don't care, If you're not giving the executive summary, but getting into the weeds and the details, their eyes are going to glaze over and you're going to lose them. Conversely, if you're dealing with the engineers, which are likely an SC or a scaredy cat, if you don't give them those details, they're not going to have enough information to make a decision and move forward. So you can see where you're sort of getting this, what do I do here? And a lot of these classes that I took were how you figure that out. And sometimes you just point blank ask the person, hey, is this enough information? Do you need more? And that's some ways that you can get through it. So really, really good information. And here's another great thing that's going to vary state by state, how your state classifies open houses. In Colorado, it's considered marketing, which means we don't need to have a signed buyer's agreement for everyone we let in the door. I can't tell you what individual states are going to do other than that. So definitely need to check that one out. One of the other areas to be cognizant of is MLSs are going to start publishing what the commission is for the buyers as well as the listing agent, because that's going to be taken off the top. So it's the true value of the home. So, if you have someone that goes, oh, I'm not offering any co-op fee, well, they're just that much higher if they go on at the same price and potentially in this market overpriced. Another fun little tidbit is if you don't get the exclusive right to buy or the buyer agency agreement signed, you don't have an agreement to work with that person. You're not entitled to your commission. If you don't get paid, you don't have E&O covering it. So that could also be another big ouch. So these are all the little things that are out there. I know in Colorado, the Forms Commission, I think they have a preliminary red line that they've released, but they said this is just for information. Don't start using or even implementing. It's likely to change. And I know it's already changed once or twice. So there's a lot of stuff coming through and it is changing. So be out there, listen, go. If you don't go to meetings, go to your state meeting. Go to your brokers, make sure you know what's coming down the pike. But that's, in terms of the lawsuit, what lookouts to be out there that could become gotchas.
I'm curious, Jason and everyone here actually, how many people here use buyer agent agreements already prior to this change? Because
Cool. I'm seeing hands. I like that.
yeah, in New York, it's pretty common for us to do that. The one caveat I will say for me, I don't know if it's how it is for you guys, and speak up and share if you think it's going to be impactful. I never take a payment from the buyer. I always say that I get agency, representation signed, and I always say that I collect my commission from the seller, because I've been licensed for about 15 years and I've never seen the seller not offering out a cooperating, commission. So it hasn't been a problem for me. Are you finding that? Is that what you're expecting? What are you feeling out there?
In my area, I'm seeing it really has to do with how good of an agent and how strong of an agent you are. In New Jersey, where I was first licensed, in the area that I practiced, no one got the buyer agency agreement signed before the contract. It was just, here's another piece of paperwork, sign it. I didn't know any better, so I basically took my wife's listing presentation, R&D'd it or ripped off and duplicated, put in 1 or 2 additional slides and went through that and got it signed before I took people out. This is an area that no one did that.
Yeah, it did change in
did it.
recent years, actually. I'd
Well,
say
this was 10 years ago that I was doing this, 8 years ago. So
Yeah.
I come out to Colorado and 3/4 of the agents are doing the same thing. They don't bother getting it signed. Well, this is something the DOJ is explicitly looking for. They want these agreements signed. More importantly, this is how you guarantee you're going to get paid. So don't know about you guys. I wake up in the morning and go to work to make money and pay my bills. So for me, it's incredibly important that I get this done. I'll take a client out once. And again, this depends on your state if you're allowed to continue this practice. But I'll take a client out once and I'll tell them up front, hey, listen, you get one shot at this before you hire me to do this. I will show you what it looks like. But after that, if we're working together, you have to sign this document, this contract, in order to hire me. And by the way, if it doesn't work out, these are the outs that you have. So the scripts, you know, have been practiced through role play, are completely ingrained. They just sort of pour out of me and I don't even realize they're scripts. That's the whole point of role play, is you want to get to that point where it's an automatic response. You don't have to think about it. So if you get an objection, you know exactly how to answer it. And if you're particularly good, if you do the NLP piece correctly and talk to people in the correct disc language, you don't get the objections. So, you know, people are like, what's your best objection handler? I don't have them anymore because I don't need them, because they're not objections.
Sure.
So, for instance, you know, I had this one person when I first started teaching the CE class. He was really upset that this wasn't all about the law of what's coming. And it's like, okay, first of all, and I've incorporated that into my class where I'm now creating the objection handler and handling it and throwing out there before it ever happens. So just through experience, you know exactly what people are going to be objecting to. Incorporate that and go, hey, some people have issues with.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, if you're having these problems, this, and this could potentially be the problem. And this is how we overcome it. And you do that in the buyer consult. You do that in the call beforehand. So when you get to that point, they're not freaking out anymore.
Yeah, Trish has her hand up and it's been waiting for a while, so.
So I have my hand up because Jason is really a master at the conversation before the buyer consult. So, you know, when you first talk to a buyer and, you know, they're wishy-washy maybe. They don't want to tell you everything because they don't want to expose themselves and make themselves vulnerable and tell you all their secrets. And, you know, they think the less they tell you, the more protected they are. Whereas with a really great agent, the more the agent knows, the more protected they are as a buyer or a seller for that matter. And so Jason used to annoy the crap out of me initially when he took this form. We called it the LP Mama. Many of you are probably familiar. There we go. Now we call it the buyer intake form or whatever.
Yes.
And he would literally spend between 30 minutes with like a high D or an hour with a high C or a high S or high I, because they like to talk. And he would go down this list and he would just ask them about themselves, their family, why they want to buy a house. What do they really want? What's really important to them? And why is that important to them? Anyway, he'd be on the, you know, I remember this one time we were going to a taco truck and the call came in from this buyer and he sat in the car. I ordered the tacos. I ate the tacos. I hung out with all these people and he was still on the phone. But at the end of that call, those people wanted to work with him because A, he cared about them. B, he spoke their language, going back to DISC and NLP. And even when they seemed reluctant to answer a question, he would have very softly go into the next thing. And I think that's the superpower that we need, because when at the end of doing this part, he literally had no objections. And this is where we all need to just power up and learn to ask the right questions in the right language so that people really identify with us and want to work with us, and not be afraid to tell them that we work for a living.
Yeah, it's, as I'm going through, I mean, you see a nice printed form up here. This is one I have on my desk. I still use these printed out in paper, take notes. You can see there's notes in the margins. It's all over the place. But the whole point with this is it's a checklist for me. I go through and have a conversation. I'm jumping around based on what the clients are asking and how they're answering. So if I ask, you know, hey, can you tell me a little bit about my family? And they just jump into, hey, we're being relocated. I'll run with that versus asking the next question on this sheet. So the point is, you control the conversation by asking questions. Some of this is, have you ever owned a home before? Yes or no? Great. I don't care what the answer is that much. The only thing I care about is that leads to the next question, which is, if you own a home, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to be selling it? Or do you need to get a bridge loan against it? Or are you planning on keeping it and renting it out? Again, it's information. It's just to lead you down the path. Some of it may be great. You've got a listing lead in disguise. Some of it may be, hey, great. I know a property manager that can help you rent your home in this other state. Oh, it's in another state. Have you ever bought in Colorado before? Just so you know, it's different. Oh, you have? Great. How long ago? 3 years ago. Okay. I don't know about other states, but I know Colorado changes its forms almost every year. How long was the contract you last had? One of the listings, the lady pulled out a contract. It was 1.25 pages typewritten by an attorney. It wasn't even a state standard form. She's like, treat me as a newbie. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. You made my life so much easier. But the whole point is, you want to set expectations through asking questions. Not like, hey, you're wrong, but you want to set it up where it's like, hey, I thought we were supposed to do it this way. It's like, yeah, 4 years ago, that's the way we did it, but we no longer are. So
Hey, Jason,
yeah,
Jason,
go ahead.
there's a couple of comments in the chat. One is, would you be willing to share your form?
Sure.
If you are, we can send it out to everybody who's in attendance with our follow-up email. And the other is, and actually it prompted a question for me when you said it earlier too. It said something about, I thought we weren't allowed to include the commissions on the MLS. I'm not sure if all MLSs are going to be handling this the same, but you made a comment, something about the listing commission being published, and I wasn't sure what you meant there. So could you just elaborate on that a little?
Sure. What I've been told, and I've been talking both with the MLSs in this area, as well as with people who are more knowledgeable than I am on the forms committee and attorneys. When the properties close, in order to do a proper appraisal or CMA, you're going to need to know what the commissions are coming off of it. So it'll be the listing commission and buyer's commission are going to be published once the sale closes. Beforehand, none of that information will be visible to anyone except the listing agent who's putting it into the system. Now, for the buyer's commission in Colorado specifically, what I was told by an attorney is, you cannot offer a commission. You can offer a seller concession to be used at closing for closing costs. So you could put the commission in there, but they don't want to see it as a percentage. They want to see it as a fixed number, such as sellers offering a $15,000 seller's concession for closing costs. Things like that. In our state, what I was also told is you write yourself into the contract, which was a no-no up until a couple of months ago. You explicitly put in, seller is to pay buyer's commission of X, which equals X dollars. All commissions are negotiable. That's going into our additional amendments in the back of the contract. We're putting our names on it, which we were never party to. So there are a lot of fundamental changes that are happening that really aren't that big, but are just basically guaranteeing we're getting paid. Because this way the escrow officer knows, oh, Jason K as the buyer's agent's getting paid. And it might be sellers paying X dollars, buyers paying X dollars, or buyers just paying it all. So any way you slice it, it needs to be written in there. And that's Colorado specific. Again, check with your states and your brokers to see what that looks like.
I'm curious, are there other New Yorkers here? Because in New York, we don't write our own contracts. The attorneys do. Are there other people here that don't write their own contracts? Everybody does it themselves, huh? No pesky attorneys to get in the way.
I don't think attorneys from New Jersey, but New Jersey, we wrote the contract and then the attorneys reviewed them and amended them accordingly. during attorney review period.
So
Mhm.
here we write a memo of agreement, and it's not signed by anybody, and no money exchanges until it gets to the attorney. And it's not even
Brianna,
required to put the commission on there. I don't have to put my commission on there. It's pretty different here in New York.
yeah, when I was in New Jersey, we were on the train line into New York City. And the first question I would ask the clients or potential clients are, hey, have you bought in New York before? And if they said yes, I'm like, just so you know, everything you know is going to be exactly backwards. Yeah. Because in New York, you don't sign the contract until you are at the closing table. In New Jersey, you sign the contract in order to make an offer and start negotiations. So, just knowing those fundamentals, being on that state line and being a half hour from New York City was
Yeah.
huge.
Well, not until you sign before you are at the closing table, but you do it after inspections, etc. So yeah, I'm licensed in Connecticut as well, and Connecticut is more similar to the rest of the country, I think. So it's going to be interesting how these things shake out, like I mentioned earlier, from state to state. Anybody have any questions? You want to jump in here? We are happy
Yeah.
to have
Bri-
Jason answer them.
Brianna's got a great question with what script do I use when discussing the sale of my buyers? And my script is, this is how you hire me. And I'm actually going to jump ahead in my presentation to that explicit page so you see what it looks like. So this is a form in Colorado. It is changing. I've already been told it's changing. I already know several things are. Several other states I've heard are going to be coming out with something like this. This is from our buyer agency agreement. This is the exclusive right to buy contract. This is what you're supposed to have signed before you take a buyer out. So on page 3, section 7.1.1 says what your success fee is. I point to that. In my case, I tell my clients, hey, listen, my success fee is 2.8%. It is negotiable. Then I point down to 7.3.1, which those numbers are going to change and location's going to change, but I'll say the same thing. And basically what that says is, just so you know, the seller may pay my fee, but if they don't, you're going to have to make up the difference. If they're offering nothing, that means you pay my whole fee. I then jump forward and point to the last page, page 6, and go, this is how you hire me and get my expertise in order to help you buy your home. That's literally how I do it. As you can see, as I was jumping through the slides, there's a lot that I do in my buyer presentation before I get to this point to prep the client, to make them want to hire me. And the whole point is you have to have your value proposition nailed. You have to know what yours is. It could be a 5-second thing. It could be a 30-second elevator pitch. It could be an hour presentation. But you need to get that information across to your client and make your client want to hire you. And that's my script. And yes, I do call it a buyer success fee. Thank you, Trish.
It says here, the Utah State Attorney General approved forms with a few blanks from Aaron here in the chat.
Yep.
Brad, if you want to chime in, since Jason was answering your question there.
Yeah, I guess my question is so you set a fee, and if the buyer, so specifically I've been told in Florida, let's say they offer X and it's lower than what the seller is willing to offer in commissions, how we can only accept whatever's on this buyer agency agreement. So how do we get our buyers to understand that, so we're not leaving money on the table necessarily, because that money just goes back to the seller. It doesn't necessarily go to the buyer.
Absolutely. And that's the conversation that you have when going through this, when you're getting them to hire you. So at this point, what I'm now adding in is, hey, listen, my success fee is blank. The seller may offer more. If they do that, what I'm going to do is do an amendment to this buyer agreement and increase it to what the seller is offering. So for instance, if they're offering 3% and I have 2.8, I'm going to put that in as the difference. Just so you know, by the way, if you don't agree to this, the seller's going to keep the money. You don't get the extra money. Is that okay with you? And if you do it right, 9 times out of 10, they'll sign it. Actually, it's 99 times out of 100. I've only had someone say, no, I don't think you're worth that once or twice. And that was early in my career.
Thank you.
I didn't realize that you'd be able to make an amendment or that you can do that now.
Depends on your state. Again, you're licensed in the state. Every state does things differently. So Colorado has an explicit form to amend the buyer agency agreement. It's different than amending the contract, a different form. Now, is every state going to do that? I don't know. I would definitely check with your brokers and with your state attorney to see what they're doing and how it's going to look like. Because I know several states don't have the ability to do it. And it's like, how do you do this then? And that I don't have the answer for. But I do know everyone's licensed by the state, not by the nation. So it's going to get interesting if you're licensed in multiple states.
Yeah, I think that's been a big, I'm sorry, Cole. Go ahead. I was just saying, I think that's been a big question in New York about if, to Brand's point, that if you put less than what is being offered out, they're saying that you can't collect what is being offered out. So, how do you get a buyer to sign for a higher number to make sure that you're protected and also make them feel comfortable that you're not going to charge them the difference, and or do you have to charge them the difference per the brokerage?
It depends on the state, from my understanding. In Colorado, what they want you to do is, let's say your commission is going to work out to be $15,000 on a 3% commission, which, getting a 3% commission would be nice. I rarely have gotten one of those. But the point being is you writing in the number, it's $15,000. Let's say it's a builder, they're trying to clear out their inventory and you're putting in, okay, they're offering 3.5% or 4%, so that $15,000 becomes $20,000. And you're writing in seller to pay buyer's agent $20,000 in additional amendments or additional provisions at the end of the contract. Now, for me, if I find that out after we make the offer and they're like, oh, no, it's, you're getting 25,000. It's okay, let me do an amendment to the contract and change that. And the whole point is there's the negotiation going on back and forth. In a hot seller's market, it may be they're not going to offer anything and you're going to take that off the price. In a buyer's market, they might be offering more. So market forces are going to dictate what we get paid. It won't be a standard percentage in an area, just like the gas prices. If you go between towns, one town, the lands may be more expensive, or there might be a tax that the county is putting on. And all of a sudden gas prices jump 20, 30 cents. Whereas in the same town, all the gas prices are the same. And that's market forces determining what your value is.
Yeah. Does someone have a question there, or maybe just someone's unmuted? And someone's just unmuted. Something that I'm interested to hear some of your insight on is obviously there are a range of objections that a buyer might have, especially with this being, in the news. I think that just from a consumer perspective, this is interesting, confusing, and kind of eye-catching to people who are thinking of buying a home. And I think we'll start to see a new suite of objections as this unfolds. But from the objections that you've already experienced, I'm sure there's people who teeter on the edge of feeling not quite sure that they want to sign that agreement, people who outright don't, but then end up doing it. So maybe you could share a little bit about what some of those objections look like and how you navigate them.
Absolutely. Buyers and sellers all seem like they go to the same objection school. They all seem to have the same basic objections. One buyer will go, I'm not going to pay your fee. I can do this myself. Yes, you absolutely can. So let me ask you this, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Do you realize that while buying a FSBO, you might get it for 7% less or 9% less than market value? You're 3 times more likely to end in litigation because you don't have a professional that can help you navigate the system. And by the way, while you might get the home for a little bit less, you're almost 8 times more likely to pay an astronomical repair fee because you didn't know to go looking for something such as a sewer issue or a foundation issue or a radon issue that might be common in specific areas and not in others. So that's one of the things that I do. Another one is, so tell me, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I understand you want to save the commission, which could be quite high. This is the single largest purchase you're likely to make in your lifetime until you make another one. Most people typically only buy 3 homes in their life. I typically sell that in a month, or you could insert a week or a year or whatever your numbers are, but they're going to be a lot better than the FSBO. So that's another way to do it. You can also pull out the FSBO chart. It's like, oh, you want to go by yourself. Okay, just so you know, number of FSBOs are dropping and have been dropping since 1980 dramatically. Less than 5% of our market does for sale by owner. So you're going to limit yourself to only 5% of the market. Is that what you want to do? But my favorite thing to do is ask a question. So I'll start off with, oh, you don't want to hire a professional to help you with the most expensive purchase in your lifetime. Out of curiosity, why is that? And they will tell you what it is right up front. Oh, I'm trying to save the commission, or I'm trying to do this, or I had a really bad experience. Depending on what they say is how you handle the objection. Oh, you've had a really bad experience. So let me ask you this. If you're willing to hire me as your professional and it doesn't work out, would you be okay being able to fire me with 3 days written notice, just sending an email or a text? Hopefully we'll be able to have a conversation before that point if you don't like what's happening. So that's kind of how I start down that road. 9 times out of 10, I ask the question, why is that? What about that don't you like? Why don't you want to hire me or hire a professional? And that starts the conversation. So again, it's asking the right question to get going.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that when we ask the right questions, we have the opportunity to really uncover what people's concerns and fears even are. And sometimes we forget, being in this industry, constantly involved in home transactions, like it becomes a lot less scary as the agent, of course. But for a buyer, experiencing this maybe for the first time, like it can be a really scary process. And when fear is involved, we tend to be more cautious and more, suspecting of signing forms and things like that. So creating as much trust as possible from the get-go is huge.
And the first-time buyers are the most trusting because they know they don't know the process. Someone who may have sold 1 or 2 homes goes, oh, I can do this. And one of the I've had a lot of doctors as clients, and I love doctors because the first question is, how do you want me to communicate? The second one is, if they object to this, it's like, oh, so to me, this sounds like you're trying to do open heart surgery on yourself to save those high hospital bills. Is that right? And as soon as they hear that, they go, well, that's absolutely stupid. And it's like, oh, I see. It's absolutely stupid. It's like, yeah, because chances are you aren't going to be paying all of my commission. And in some cases, you're probably not going to be paying any of it. In most cases, especially in the market that I'm in right now here, most people are still offering co-ops because unless you're in a very specific market segment where there is no inventory, a lot of things are sitting and getting price reductions right now. So Omar, you've got your hand up. You've got a question?
I don't know if it's a question, but more along to support what you're saying. I feel if it's someone that you have not met before at all and they're calling you about a listing or however they got to you first, I usually mention on that phone conversation that when we meet, we will be signing a couple of documents that we now have to start signing. And one of those explains how you and I are working together. And then, of course, some disclosures we have to sign about fair housing, et cetera.
Yep.
And I feel like just initially that having that conversation on the phone, they are already prepared to have some sort of awkward conversation about documents that they have to sign. Because the reality is, after August 17th, at least here in Connecticut, we cannot even show a house without at least the buyer broker, or at least for that one particular house. So at least you have them for that one house, and then maybe it's up to you to then say, if you liked how this went, I can show you some other properties, but then we can sort of expand on this document here. You can do it today, or we can talk about it at another time. But I feel like having that initial conversation with this complete stranger on the phone prepares them for this great conversation you are having now. And I found that has been pretty successful.
It definitely does, because that leads you directly to the buyer consult. And that's where you do a lot of presuppositions and basically answer their objections before they ever get there. So the whole point is, yeah, I'll be happy to share my buyer consult, because I think we only created one slide in here. So if you guys want it, I'll drop in a quick URL. Quick show of hands. Do you guys want to see the buyer consult and what that looks like? Okay, let me go drop in the URL.
Also, while you're looking at your presentation, someone asked a little ways up in the chat if you might be able to share, that disc image that you had in the upper right-hand corner. It was like,
oh, yeah.
I don't know if you have a bigger version of that, but I think that, especially in response to Coach Christopher Chamberlain's comment, I think there's a lot of interest in getting better versed and communicating using disc.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, just a heads up, this link that you just sent in here, I'm not getting taken to the page. I get a blank screen, by the way.
It works for me, but it leads me to a form.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Form. Yeah, because this way I can send it out directly. It's a fairly large file.
Gotcha. All right, I'll try to open it in a different browser, maybe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just realized I was on mute. Sorry. Colby does a really nice recap with everybody after the call. So if the worst case scenario, she can send it out that way.
Yeah, we'll send it to you, Eva.
I have to go off track here for a second. I wanted to mention it when I first got on that I actually have a closing today that's a little bit of a ride away. So I have to leave the call early. But I will listen to the rest of the recording, and I just wanted to say thank you to Jason as I pop off. I didn't want anybody to think I was being rude.
Absolutely.
Happy closing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So going back to the disc for a second, which I just threw up here, there's a couple of generalities that you could use. One of the things I like to do is I like to ask what people do for a living, because that gives me a really good insight into what their disc is. Am I 100% accurate? No, but I have a pretty good idea how to communicate with them. So the colors here are not arbitrary. They're done on purpose. The C's and the S's, they're cooler colors because those types of behaviors are much more reserved and much calmer. The D's and the I's, they're a lot warmer personality, and the colors are appropriate. Those C's and D's, bullet points, checklists. If you give someone a checklist, and I literally cut and paste from the Colorado contract and share it as a Google form where people can see this is the due date and this is what's coming up, these people are in heaven. The I's and the S's, I have a great story I'm not going to get into, but if you buy my book, you'll get to read it. The short answer is, these are the touchy-feely emotional people. They buy on emotions and they'll admit it. Watching an engineer buy a home and try to make it where this is not an emotional decision on their part is hysterical. I love watching that happen because you're watching the inner turmoil. Mind you, a lot of these people don't really look like they're having emotions. It's like, oh my God, I'm so happy. It's like, seriously? It's like, show some emotion. And, they're out there, woohoo, this is amazing. And they're like, yeah, this is great. It's like, all right, whatever. But knowing that and asking the questions, key. So those SCs, the nickname, I've dropped this before, is scaredy cat. These are the type of people that need data to make decisions. So give it to them. Those DCs, not so much. Especially a high DI, they have the attention of a goldfish. By the way, most salespeople are DIs. I'm a DI. Keep in mind, I did engineering for 18 years, very successfully. You'd think I'd be a C. Actually, I'm a DI with a trailing C, but no dick jokes, please. Anyway, those SCs, they want to see what the process is. So show them, walk them through it. These are the groups of people that I used to, and I probably still will because I can in Colorado. I can take people out without having a buyer agency agreement signed. So I'll go, hey, listen, you get a pass. I will show you what this looks like. And by the way, you're not going to be able to buy this home. This is just a dry run. Now, I have had an engineer go, yeah, I want to buy the house, but that's another story. So what are the drawbacks of these personalities? What are the watch-outs? D's, get to the point fast. They're already on to the next thing. I's, they might have the attention span of a goldfish and be distracted by the squirrel running up the tree. Like that one, seriously. S's, super reserved, literally won't know what's going on inside their head. Ask them, or you might get a howler-like email that all of a sudden explodes in your inbox. You're like, whoa, where did that come from? That's how these people work. C's, they can be stubborn, really dig their heels in. So that's the big watch outs. Now, keep in mind, most people are not one single behavioral style. Less than 9% of the population is a single thing, like a high D. So you're typically going to get some sort of blending. The hardest one to figure out is if you have an ISC or that sort of combination. That's a chameleon, because when they get pushed and stressed, they all of a sudden become a high D. You're like, whoa, where did that come from? But these are generalities and tricks on how to deal with these people. And it really helps because they're like, oh my God, you get me, you speak my language. If you look through my reviews, you'll see that common theme a lot. So great question about the disc. Obviously we could spend multiple hours on it. I took a week-long class on disc 3 times because it's that nuanced. So
we actually do have, as I mentioned, we do these on the 2nd and 4th Monday of every month. And on August 12th, we have an executive coach, Laura Treyance, coming on talking about how to utilize DISC at a really high level. So if this is an interesting topic to you, we'll definitely make sure that you get that link. I mean, I know it's really interesting to me. This is such a people business.
And Laura trained me in DISC.
Oh,
She
really?
was a boss trainer, yeah. She is amazing. I've had the privilege of having a one-on-one with her for over an hour, and she truly is an amazing instructor. So you're really lucky to get her.
Yeah, her and my mom are good friends. I'll actually just drop the link right now because, this industry, it's all about people. And to your point, buying a home, selling a home, it is such an emotional decision, whether you are an emotional person or not. Like, it might not feel emotional, but that doesn't mean it isn't challenging in its own unique way to your personality type. So being able to speak people's language really does make the whole process easier. And it's how you show your value, right? That was something we talked about when we were planning the outline for this call, is like really being able to show your value. And you get to show your value by being curious about the people that are going to commit to working with you.
Yeah, someone just asked about my book, so I'm pulling the link for that.
Cool.
And
if anyone has any questions, we've got about 10 minutes left on the call, and now would be a great time to ask. Feel free to raise your hand. You don't have to type it in the chat. Save your
or
face.
just shout it out. And I just dropped the Amazon link for the book. You can get it on Kindle or as a paperback. I personally like the paperback because, well, I like paper.
So I have a question. So in terms of like in Florida, you can be a transaction broker. So we can represent both sides. And what you're saying in Colorado, you have a marketing, your open houses are not considered, like you wouldn't have to have this signed. Do you know of other, how they're handling it in other places where you would have to have something signed? Do you have any, can you speak to that at all?
I don't know what other states' laws are since I'm not licensed in any other state anymore. From what I heard in New Jersey, they hadn't answered that issue yet. And that was about a month ago when I last talked to someone specifically about this. The guidance from the state was we're looking into it and how we want to handle it. In New Jersey, we were dual disclosed agents, and you could not be a transactional agent. In Colorado, you cannot be a dual disclosed agent. You can be a transaction agent. You're doing the same thing in both states. So that's just an example of every state is handling things slightly differently and calling things different, or the same things by different names. So in New Jersey, I was an agent. In Colorado, I am a broker, even though I'm not a broker of record. Again, doing the exact same job, same responsibilities, different title. So check to make sure what it is and what you have to do for those details, because it is going to be different.
And so if anyone else has a question, please, cut me off. In terms of now everyone is going to be using the buyer agreements. We were using a loyalty agreement. We didn't use an actual buyer agency agreement because no one in our area was using them.
Okay.
So we at least had a loyalty agreement. It didn't stipulate any kind of fees from the buyer. So in the areas that you're seeing where agents or sellers are not offering any kind of concession or any kind of what we called commission, are you seeing the buyers now offering that price, offering less, whatever that amount is on the house, or what are you seeing in that, or are you seeing that at all?
I'm not seeing it very often in my market because we've transitioned, depending on the sector, either as a balanced market or hardened to a buyer's market, with a couple of notable exceptions. So I've heard of people going, "Oh, we're not offering anything anymore." The whole point is, great, and I do this in the buyer consult. If you're not offering, or if the seller's not offering, it's going to come back during the appraisal because you're getting a loan. By the way, the appraiser is taking that into account and it might not appraise. So that could be the exact same conversation you have on the listing side. So yeah, that's going to matter. And that's part of the reason why these MLSs are going to be publishing what our commissions are and what we've earned. Now, keep in mind, at the closing table, we always saw what the other side had on the settlement statement.
Is that still going to happen? Or it has to, right?
Yeah, it has to be published data because an appraiser's got to know point blank who's getting paid what. Because if there's, again, making numbers up, if there's a blank percent and a Y%, those two added up are going to need to be taken off the top on what the value of the home is.
Right.
Got another Jason talking.
That's all right, they're muted. So just in the short version, it's even if doing CMAs and what's the value of this property, we're going to be needing to know that information ourselves as professionals, and it will be taken into account. So if someone's not willing to offer it, part of the conversation on the listing side is, hey, listen, you're not going to be able to keep this money because, or did you know you're not going to be able to keep this money? Again, framing it as a question is key.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Framing something that could otherwise be a statement as a question gets people to do their own thinking about these changes.
And that comes from coaching, that comes from NLP. So it could be simple as just adding a tie down, like the word right. So it's like, you want to do this, you want to do this so you get the home you want, right? And you don't ask it as a question. The question becomes a statement, even though you're asking it as a question. And again, that's NLP. And the class that I took with Joel the first time, it was an hour a week for 18 weeks with homework. So this isn't something you're going to get just by watching a couple of YouTube classes or reading a book. This takes practice, and it really took me probably a good year or year and a half to get somewhat decent and fluent with it. But it is an absolute skill that has elevated my career to the heights where it currently is, and I wouldn't be here without it. So big takeaway, if you haven't had an NLP class, I highly recommend taking one. Great questions. We've got, what, 4 minutes left? Anyone else have any questions?
Everyone's feeling ready to get those buyer contracts signed, have the tough conversations, and come out the other end, helping your clients and being proud of what we do. So
Yeah,
we're all
absolutely.
showing up here on the Monday after a holiday. No, it's not easy, and everyone's busy playing catch up and maybe even still feeling like they're dragging from the holidays. So we're really glad to have such a great turnout and have everyone join us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking questions. Really appreciate you guys. I'll send out a recap with all of the links that Jason shared in the chat, as well as Coach Anthony, I think it was. Christopher, sorry. Coach Christopher. And our next call, I'm looking at my calendar over here, is on July 22nd, which is the day after my birthday. So you all have to come. And we are going to be hosting a really interesting call on ADUs. Some people know what those are, some people don't. If you've ever heard of an in-law suite, an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. They're quite popular out west. People build, additional small properties in the backyard of their properties. And we have Ryan O'Connell, who has 17,000 YouTube subscribers, and his entire YouTube channel is dedicated to the exploding ADU market. He's going to come on and talk about how this is changing real estate. And it's going to be a really, really interesting call, I think. So we hope you join us for that one. And then many more to come. Like I said, like Jason talked about, so much disc. Laura is going to share a lot on that topic. So join us for that if this is interesting to you.
And she's a really, really good teacher.
Yeah, we're really excited to have her on. Randy said he just bought your book.
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate it. Let me know what you think of it. And if you have questions, definitely reach out. I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, and if you can, if you're willing to share your phone or your email, Jason, I'll send that around to everyone in our recap email so people can reach out if they want to connect with you directly.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you a link where people can even make the a 15-minute appointment to chat with whatever questions they have.
Perfect.
I'll send you that Calendly link.
All righty. Thank you
All right.
so much, everyone. Hope you have a really productive week and a good Monday.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you coming.
Thanks, Jason. Talk soon.
Bye now.
Bye.